What can I let go of that isn't necessarily a bad thing? It's just the thing that I may not need anymore.
I relate to that so deeply, so authentically.
I truly believe we can recover.
I agree with you 100%.
100%. There is no doubt in my mind.
It takes a multi-pronged approach to really have a grasp on any malady.
Hello and welcome to my podcast, Show Up. My name is Daryl Dittmer. As someone who built financial freedom from scratch, I understand what's possible, as there was a time when I thought I had only a life of mediocrity ahead of me. Drinking, drugs, and zero confidence plagued me. The one thing that changed my life is when I decided to do things differently and give success a chance. And I don't just mean financial success, I mean life success. I started to show up to my life and my career, and one step after another provided me the life I never thought possible. At any age, life begins to change when you start to show up. Welcome to my podcast. Today, my guest is Mike Coyne. Mike is the founder of CureVine, a private practice focused on an evolving and multi-pronged approach to treatment. He is an individual counselor and a family addiction specialist who has been in recovery himself for 8 years. Prior to his current work, Mike spent 15 years in NFL and NCAA football as a coach and a scout. Welcome, Mike. Good to see you again, man.
Good to see you too, man. Been looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, I was as well. I'm happy we're here, and you know, I know we've spoken before. We talked about a whole ton of things, and you know, we're going to get after it again here for about 35 minutes. But to start off, and the question I like to ask is, tell me about an event or a time in your life that caused you to show up for your life in a different way.
That's a really good question to start off, because that's obviously that is something that I've failed to do for so much of my life, you know, that it's very poignant to me, the times that I've been able to. First thing that comes to my mind is, and I don't need to get into a ton of detail about it, but recently, as you mentioned, my background was in football for so long, and obviously hugely attached to that emotionally, just a passion, huge passion of mine. And around this time of year when the changes are going on, I've noticed that there's kind of this like seasonal trigger almost, you know, and I got a call, which I do most years. People kind of, I keep in touch with people, and sometimes we'll check in about maybe an opportunity or something. And I had a decent one this time that maybe would have allowed me to somehow balance my life that I've created for myself post football, and still kind of dip my toe back in. And for me, it's almost like pouring a drink in front of an alcoholic, because that is it's extremely tempting. And when it comes down to it, I have made that decision already. I've already gone through that process of deciding this does not align with the values that allow me to live my life the way I need to for my recovery, my health, my family, all that. So this was challenging, and I found myself, while there's a little bit of sting to it, I was proud of the way in which I responded to it and went through that process without too much agony. I'm not going to say there was zero, but there, less so. Than certainly when I made the decision initially, and even since. So I think I showed up for myself there by putting what I know are my true needs, my priority values ahead.
That's great, Mike. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in, we make these decisions for ourselves and like, oh, well, okay, fine, that's over. So let's just throw that in the rearview mirror and forget about it. And you know what? Things that affected our lives and things that we spent so much time doing, it's just not that. it takes time to sort of unplug, right? It takes time to feel differently about it, but and that's what's in the rear view. But then, going forward, I've got all of this stuff in my windshield, and that's where I live. I live in the windshield. I don't live in the rear view mirror, but sometimes it's difficult to let go.
I don't know if there's by chance I've made a post today on Instagram, which I'm not great about doing frequently, but I post one. But you're going to have to check it out after what you just said.
All right.
You're going to need to check it out because it's a picture of a biker with like 50 rear view mirrors on each side.
Oh, wow.
And I saw that and laughed and just made like a little joke about it on there. But it's just funny for you to make that reference because it was directly on my mind earlier.
Well, I think it's easy, especially when we get into recovery and spend a little time in recovery. It's, all the really cool stuff is in the windshield. And because we have a new life and we're challenging ourselves, hopefully, and we're doing the things that are necessary to move our lives forward, while also spending some time, taking out the garbage and jettisoning that trash, which is absolutely crucial to recovery, to sort of free ourselves, right, from the shackles of the past. But I also, as I think about that and spent a lot of time doing that, and things still come up, and it's been a long freaking time. But that's okay, because I heard Joseph Campbell say one time, he's like, look, I mourned the loss of so many things in life, including my parents and this and that, but they're not really gone because they're still with me. They're still, those memories are still with me, and those changes because of them were still with me. And so it's okay to take some of that stuff in the rearview mirror and it's still going to be with us. It's just a matter of how connected to it we are. Do you find that to be true?
I find that absolutely to be true. I think, and what you're speaking to, I think really typifies the different phases we kind of go through in our recovery, which, as I think you and I have talked about before, recovery to me, totally different definition than sobriety. Recovery for me was learning how to meet my basic needs, meet my, the rest of my needs, and live functionally in a way that would healthy, happy, and of use to the people around me. So totally different than just sobriety for me. Totally different.
Right.
And in doing that, there is, look, why do we get into recovery? Because we're making a change, right? Because obviously there was something about the way we were living our lives that was not meeting our needs or fulfilling us in some way, or maybe every way. In a lot of cases, it's usually pretty insidious. So I think there's a tendency, especially maybe just past that early recovery, intermediate, to want to almost do like opposite action, to use like a CBT term, to like, where, well, shit, everything I was doing back then must have been terrible, and I have to do everything the exact opposite of how I was doing it before. And that's not how it is. That's just not how it is. We still, just because we were addicts or alcoholics at a point in our lives does not even mean that we were bad people at those times, even in active addiction. I believe strongly. I think we have experiences that we are not proud of, and again, that's why we've made changes. But it's not an issue of morality. So, yeah, we still have to be able to hang on to it. I think it takes some time, especially when you're making such a drastic change and commitment in your life, to be able to parse, okay, what can I actually hang on to here that was that felt good and was good, because those are two very different boxes to check,
Right. I think there's this part of living that is, and living in recovery, I like to look at it like, I truly believe we can recover. We can recover.
I agree with you 100%.
100%. There is no doubt in my mind. And I think sometimes that's a remnant. When I first came up in the 12 steps, they're kind of talking to me about, oh man, if you don't do this and this and this, you're gonna, and it was very threatening. It was kind of like going to church as a little kid thinking I'm going to hell if I did something wrong. And
Yep.
believe me, I truly believe that I owe my life to the 12 steps because they gave me a roadmap. They gave me a way to get my shit together, get my head out of my ass, and live differently. But that doesn't mean that everything applies for all time. And I had to be open to morphing my belief system and expanding that. And I think that's crucial. And those remnants, a lot of them we can get rid of. We can just say, you know what? I don't believe that for me, and it happened probably at 8 or 9 years sober, like I don't need to go to a meeting every freaking day to stay sober. I got my shit together. And I'm getting it together more and more over time. So anyway, that's just kind of a past remnant that I think about when I think, what can I let go of that isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing that I may not need anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, I believe a sign of our health, our biological, psycho, and social health is to have to be in some state of evolution, throughout our lives, that we're constantly evolving. And obviously the rate of that varies throughout our life. But I think if when we're really stuck in just a period when it's total stasis for a prolonged period, I think that usually isn't very, very healthy. I'm curious because the way you spoke about what the 12-step program meant to you, and the way that the principles influenced you in terms of giving you a roadmap and how your needs evolved over time. I relate to that so deeply, so authentically. So I'm curious about when you started to arrive at that decision, that what you were hearing in terms of the more rigid and fire brimstone parts of it that are like, that this is gospel, and obviously that does exist. That's part of the culture in a lot of ways. Did you get any pushback from people like in that community?
Sometimes, and I'm kind of a maverick anyway, a bit of a defiant son of a gun, if you will. So yeah, there were times, but I had a mentor at that time who was very in tune with continued evolvement, as you had mentioned. And so, yeah, I got some pushback, but not from the people that were really teaching me. And that was a cool thing, because they gave me things and showed me things, and I sought them out. It was part of my sort of want to, because I wanted to be different. I didn't want to just say, okay, here's your book and here's your steps, good luck. I wanted to be better, man. I wanted to do something with this time that I'm running around the planet, So anyway, that was a part of me changing, and once you get a feel, and I think it's important for people young in recovery to understand that, you can start to trust yourself at a point where you can listen to what's in here, not necessarily what's in here, but what's in here, and trust that, increasingly over time. And then you'll come to a point where this runs your life and makes decisions for you and leads and, all that sort of thing. So, and I think that's important for people to understand that evolving is, we don't have to just listen to the fire and brimstone or the great stuff or the medium stuff. We can start to listen to this. And that's a cool place to be.
But it's kind of counterintuitive to, I think, the way that we got to the change that we made. It's almost counterintuitive to that. So it becomes, or at least for me, I should say, it was hard to even admit to myself that I was going to trust certain instincts at first. Again, it's an evolution. It didn't happen in a day, right. But it definitely ran contrary to so much of what I had the messages that I had received from people who were in long-term recovery. So there's like some questioning there. When is it you're in a state of pretty high vigilance, if not hyper vigilance, those first couple months or even years out of recovery. I mean, especially once you've experienced the good, you really don't want to go to the bad, back to the bad, man. You really don't. And anything that threatens that security is scary. So I found that to be sort of a transitional process for me when I realized I could begin to trust my internal compass a little bit more.
Absolutely. And I think there's, we didn't have to get into recovery because we had our shit together and everything was going great and we were like secure with ourselves.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I was a disaster area and I was young and so I didn't have a clue anyway, much less, about recovery or life or whatever. I just didn't have a clue. So trusting that little voice and you could call it, I could call it trusting myself, or I could call it trusting something bigger than me, whatever. But that's hard to do when you come from a place of high insecurity and always like, oh man, what's going to happen next? This is terrible. All this bad stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh wait, there's a place in here that's kind of calm and knows the answers. Like, no, how could that possibly be?
No, I've just been learning that I can't trust anything. Right. That's my first thought,
Right. Exactly. So this brings me to another question, Mike, and you deal with, I think, a lot of the science around recovery, right? In terms of how that functions. And I'd love to have your take on, how does it balance with the want to part of recovery? What do you find there with people who are successful and or unsuccessful in recovery?
In terms of the way it interacts with?
In terms of so there's the science of it. Look, okay, if I do this and this and this and follow this path and versus the want to part of it, like, hey man, I'm going to show up and do this. I don't care what happens. I always found that the want to part of it is incredibly important, if not the most important.
Yeah, that sounds like based on how you just described it, that sounds like the priceless ingredient, into the dish for sure.
Right. And so I just want to, because we're in a culture these days, I think, and this is kind of the premise for my question, we're in a culture these days where people are more concerned about, I hate to say it, but the buzzwords sometimes than they are with, let me go do the work and heal. Do you find that? Do you find that you have to straighten people's sort of thought process out? Like, look, man.
Absolutely. First of all, people are more aware of mental health issues in general, from a hard science and a soft science standpoint, where we still want that to progress, obviously, but a very natural corollary to that is that the people who were completely, like, let's say, naive, or if I can say ignorant without having too negative a connotation, who were completely ignorant, they just move into that kind of like undereducated zone, and the undereducated move into the mildly educated, you know what I mean? And it kind of progress. Right. Everybody moves up a little bit in terms of their awareness and understanding. And you could argue that being in that undereducated zone is more dangerous, less in terms of the way you exchange information with others and understand the other people in your life, or if you're processing it yourself and on your recovery journey, that it's more dangerous to your own efforts, because that is one of the real hallmarks to me of when people start to gain more access to the broader education and literature and stuff, is they have buzzwords. Well, those are buzzwords because they make sense. They resonated with enough people that they caught on, that those words caught on and became part of our nomenclature. Well, they're also a very, very easy thing to mimic. That 10 years ago, some of these concepts and the terms that describe them may have shown you a person who was highly experienced in an area, whereas now, given the proliferation of information that's out there, it's easier for people to basically mask. And if your history is in addiction, you're probably a very good masker by nature. So yeah, I think there are two sides to that. I really do. I think there's an interesting dichotomy there.
I agree with you, and I think that want to part carries us through the difficult times when we don't know what's going on. And we're, oh man, I don't even know how to do this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to last. I don't know what's happening. I'm so confused. But however, the want to will take me to the next step that helps me evolve and helps me get through the whole "this too shall pass" thing, as
right.
opposed to, getting sucked into it. And I think that's an important thing. And I know there's a lot around addiction when, people talk about it being a disease and this and that. And I'm not into the labels, and I don't care. I really don't care. You can call it whatever the hell you want it.
Yeah.
Call it anything you want. However, if I was going to have a disease, I would want one that allows me to heal when I choose to do that. When I have been sick and tired of being sick and tired enough, I can make my disease go away over time. That's how I look at it. That's how I look at fixing addiction and being able to recover, not just being in recovery,
right,
for the rest of my life. How do you feel about that thought process, Mike?
So yeah, I do buy into the disease model. However, I do think it also has gotten us, meaning like people in recovery or people in treatment, into some sticky situations in terms of how we process that and treat things. That could be said of a lot of different maladies in general. I think that the more I understood, this is not going to be true for everybody. For me, learning about the neurobiology behind it, about the neurobiological changes that had happened in my brain over the course of addiction, and, some of the neurodivergence that I was probably born with or had since a very early age. Understanding all of that was important to me because I'm someone who needs to see everything to really buy in and commit and have the want to, that, like, as you said. I don't think that's true for everybody, though, and that's not a good or a bad thing. Well, it might not be a great thing. It's a difficult thing. It's a challenge. You could argue it makes it more of a challenge, but I think it can be simpler if you don't need all those things to be able to buy into a process, and the gift of desperation and some kind of path and a deep desire for change is enough, to get you at least to that next step. But like I said, for me, it was just, where we say we're terminally unique. That's one of those cliches out there that I like, and I'm absolutely view myself as terminally unique. But in truth, I recognize that there is a tapestry of different things that contributed to where I ended up in life. And if I follow that train of thought, that's what I believe, then moving on past that requires me to have some awareness around each of those areas, because any one of those areas are potential risk factors. Again, not even talking about a chemical relapse, but they are potential risk factors for me to not continue to recover and continue to evolve in the way that I've stated is a strong value of mine. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. I feel like, and I'm not, it's funny because I was in a business, for a long time, and there were these guys who were very analytical and I'm a firm believer. It takes everyone to make the world go around. It takes absolutely everyone. And I thank God for the rocket scientists and the regular scientists and people who do all that stuff that I would not be willing to do. Because I'm just not built for that. I'm built for, okay, let's dive in. Let's swim around. We can simulate. I'll probably simulate drowning because I'll be drowning in all the stuff while I'm splashing around trying to change things. And that's completely cool. I just have this sort of cowboy thing. But I appreciate people who think about it the way that you do, Mike, because it takes that in many instances, to develop the want to, or to understand which direction to go with the want to. And I think that's a very cool thing. One thing I do want to say is however anyone decides they want to recover, I don't care. Just recover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just recover. And that, so is there a time we could say, oh, I am recovered? I don't know. I don't know if that,
again, yeah, like you said, I don't care. I'm not worried about the label.
Right. It doesn't matter, in that regard. But as you just mentioned, am I continuing to evolve and move myself forward? And that's the crux of the matter. Because as you also mentioned earlier, there's no such thing as static. I really believe that we're either moving forward or we're moving backward. And
yeah,
and I think that's because static to me would be moving backward.
That's a total. Philosophically, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, if I'm not moving forward. So, all right, cool stuff, man. I like this because I want people to have 1,000 ways to think about recovery, and different ways to perceive it and dive into it at whatever level. The only thing that I would say is when you're diving in, give it everything you got. And that's, whatever that is, however you decide to do it, abandon yourself to the process. And I feel like that's what we both did, right? And just maybe in different ways.
Yeah. Well, I think we both had open minds, obviously to some extent, and I think I'm just going to say real quickly, I think why one of the reasons that works for me is because what I see from the people with whom I work on a daily basis, and I mean, just as a huge trend, especially an emerging trend in age group, is an overemphasis on the biological. And as you know, I very strongly believe in a biopsychosocial approach, a multi-pronged approach to treatment. So there is like this balance for me, that I am very interested in and compelled by and needed to understand some of the, hard science stuff, which relates to biology and psychology, obviously. But I have a very strong, it's almost like a pet peeve when people are overly focused on the biological, because I believe so strongly that it takes a multi-pronged approach to some extent for people to really have a grasp on, I would argue, any malady, so that I think that's why that works for me, is that there's a little balance in there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. I mean, I liken it with my simple explanations of things. It's just how I perceive life is like, okay, what's the most basic thing I can, how can I grasp this, in a way that really makes sense to my life. And I look at it like it's the same thing, body, mind, heart, and soul. If I'm not treating all of those aspects of me in some way, I'm leaving something on the table.
Absolutely.
And maybe some big stuff on the table that needs to get addressed.
Absolutely. I mean, there's just, I can make a counter argument. I can play devil's advocate for just about anything. I like it. Because I'm kind of like you, I think, in that, like, whatever you want to call it, maverick or rebellious or whatever, I have that in me for sure. But I can't make an argument against my view in that respect. That is one of the few things on which I feel pretty absolutist, that it takes, again, just multi-pronged, however you want to break it down.
For sure. When you look at people, and if you sort of examine yourself and your life and the people that you've worked with over the years and seen, and in recovery or not in recovery or whomever, right? And this is something that happened to me, but I had a definition of success when I was younger, say in my 20s. Yes. And then all this shit happened. And now I'm not in my 20s anymore. And I have a very different definition of success. Have you found that to be true for you? And how would you portray that? I
mean, I'm sure, if people are watching rather than listening, they can see the way I'm reacting to you even saying that, of how strongly that I do relate to that. My definition of success, I would say, my ill-conceived definition of success, I would say it was one of the primary drivers of my addiction and one of the primary enablers, because the way I viewed success, was, first of all, extremely self-centered, extremely superficial. It was really, and for me, when my life became pretty myopic by working in football, for that long, that the things that signified success for me also became very narrow in scope, and that cheated me out of a lot. And I say cheated me, it didn't happen to me. I did those things. I lived with that mindset and reinforced it for myself. But it took some time and some very deliberate reprogramming of my mindset and I believe my even my neurobiology in terms of what gives me reward, and to the end of what I view as success. Like I said earlier, happy, healthy, and of use to the people around me. That's just like my quick, the best quick encompassing I can do of how I view it now. Or another way is measuring my actions by my values. Do I have a very clear understanding, or am I working to one of what my values are, and with the follow-up of do my actions match? To me, that's an indication of successful. And it's sad, but I spent the majority, I'm 40, about to be 41, and I spent the first 30 years of my life with that totally lost. That was not it at all. It was all about next position, who knows your name, just bullshit on it. That's almost embarrassing to admit now, but
well, we have to be where we were to get to where we are, right?
100%.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that is just how it works. And I know for me, I would have no desire to be where I am had I not been where I was, because I was so damn sick of where I was. And many times in my life, over the course of those years, I've been like, you know what? This isn't it. This isn't it. Yeah. And I'm going to shift gears, and this isn't it. And I'm going to shift gears, or this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll expand on this, and it's wonderful that we had the opportunity to make those decisions. And I think I told you when we were talking the last time that, my different definition of success went from how much money can I make to waking up in the morning with a smile on my face. And if I wake up in the morning with a smile on my face, something must be happening that's working. And I do. And that's a, I thank God for that. I really do. I think that's a great thing. So Mike, it's been wonderful, man. And we're getting to the end here, but I wanted to, if you would let people know where to find you and your work, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. People can find my private practice is called Curevine, just spelled exactly like it sounds, CUREVINE. So curevine.com is the website. I do some work on social media, but more so in kind of like the deeper anonymous parts of the internet, like Reddit and Discord, where some of the more elusive demographics can be found. And that's why I'm there, I like it. But also on Instagram, I do share some of that stuff on Instagram, at Curevine. They can find me on there. And then I appear regularly on the podcast called No Alcohol Needed. So
very
find
cool.
any of those places.
Yeah, that's great. I will. I'll put your links on the show notes and make sure people know where to find you. But thanks, Mike. It's great catching up again. I'm glad we were able to to do this and spend some time. And I want to stay in touch. I feel like we have some really cool things to just talk about in general. So
absolutely, I'm with you 100%. I think that was clear from one of the first times that we talked. We had some connections on some pretty rare stuff. So
yeah,
not just the painting behind me, which for the listeners, Daryl also owns.
I do. I have that painting in my house. Yeah. Very cool. All right, Mike. Thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
So good.
Thank you for joining us on the Show Up podcast. To learn more about me, my coaching, or my books, please feel free to visit my website, DarylDittmer.com. DarylDittmer.com. Thank you.